into that finals. Here you go. The players who are playing. On your left, Blake Madsen. On your right, Will Kruger, Rakdos Demon on both sides. 2025 trial winner trophy in the middle. That's what's on the line. Here we go.
It's a nice looking trophy. As far as the matchup is concerned, you see the names Rakdos Demons, and I'm going to be honest with you, there's not a ton of differences between the deck lists either. So the differences are Will has 3 Shieldred, where Blake has 2 Shieldred and 1 Croxa, and Will has 2 Go for the Throat, where Blake has 1 Go for the Throat and 1 Bitter Triumph. Everything else is the same. So, I mean, you think about it that way. And as far as the differences here, I do think having the Croxa, if the game goes long enough to the point where you can, escape the Croxa, I think that is a pretty significant upside. Like I would rather be the person who has the Croxa rather than the third Shieldred, because there is, enough ways to kill Shieldred. And there's not, there's no graveyard trespassers to be able to punish those Croxas.
Yeah. And I mean, in a resource battle like this, as the first Shieldred arrives, it all just comes down to who has the last threat standing, right? And that's exactly what Croxa is good for, is coming out of your graveyard to be that last threat standing, escaping your graveyard, if you will. We'll see if Blake has an answer here to Shieldred, though. Does have that Annex going and has the Mutavault ready to activate for it. Second Annex.
I mentioned I'd rather be the person on the Croxa than the Shieldred. Well, not if the person who the non-Shieldred player doesn't have an answer to the Shieldred. As we see, there's going to be some break evens, right?
Because an interesting one.
Each of the draws will be you lose 2, but you gain 2. So, Blake not losing a ton of life here because the annexes do regain the life. But yeah, without an answer to the Shieldred, it is going to be kind of tough for Blake to just not be dead on the following turn.
Yeah, that's obviously great long-term card advantage, but the fact you have to tax yourself a mana to not just get burned out by your own annexes means that Blake maybe would not have preferred that for that turn. Now he does have extra cards for this turn, but as a result, you're facing down an additional threat, including a Mutavault on your opponent's side. So you basically decide, okay, I have to spend my own mana activating my Mutavault so that my own annexes don't kill me. And all of a sudden you're looking at basically just 4 mana available to deal with Shieldred try to lose your game.
Oh boy. Well, Blake's only play that doesn't leave him dead on board is 5 mana make a 6/6, which means if Will has basically anything, we're good, because on board he can animate the Mutavault, send everything. Blake trades for the Shieldred, goes to 4 because remember the annexes do break even since Blake has a demon in play.
That's right.
But any kill spell is going to do it here for Will, even a Fatal Push.
And he has the second trigger of the second chapter here of the Fable, the Sculpt of the Hand even more. When we see a Blood Crypt hit the graveyard.
Yeah, interesting. Only discarding 1 here, and that's why.
Activates the Mutavault, and just like that, we thought it might go long, but instead it actually went pretty quick. Both these players know what's up in the matchup. Will Kruger taking game 1 of Blake Madsen there. Rakdos Demons in the not quite 75 card mirror, but pretty darn close over the course of the at least the 60. Says something about Rakdos Demons this week, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely one of the, I think might be the most played deck of the weekend. There were 5 copies in the top 8, and definitely, that was the highlight of the weekend for sure. Now, as far as the sideboards are concerned, because, we mentioned how the main decks are essentially identical. There's 2 cards difference in the main deck. The sideboards is where it gets a little interesting. Both of these sideboards are pretty different. So for Blake has an additional copy of Croxa. I think that's going to be something he definitely wants to go towards. Presuming the game doesn't, we don't have a repeat of game 1, I guess. Liliana of the Veil is kind of interesting as this way to, play it, kill the first, kill your creature, just get an immediate edict, and then have this permanent in play that can threaten to eventually sort of quote unquote end the game with the ultimate. So that might be something that Blake wants to go towards. I don't know if you want these additional kill spells like Torch and Anoint with Affliction. The Torments, on the other hand, I think are pretty good because it's one of your few ways that you can get the Annex off the battlefield.
Yeah.
And then past that, Extinction Event is interesting, but it kind of lines up weirdly. Like if you both have evens in play, you don't necessarily want to cast that. But yeah, that's going to be Blake's sideboard. So let's see if we can get Will's sideboard up on screen for you. And I mentioned
There we
there
go.
was some big differences here. And Will, this is where the differences come in. So Will has 3 copies of Invoke Despair, and if you could pick any one
Yeah,
card for the mirror match, I think this would be the single best card because it gets the annex, it gets the demon token, and it draws you a card, and all of that in one card is a lot of value. So Will's going to want to go towards those.
that's a great one in
Yeah.
this mirror, right? Like, I don't know how many times Will is. We talked a lot about the diverse field today, and some of the players even getting towards the top 8 saying I'm playing against something different every round. But if Will has played any mirrors today, I think Invoke Despair might well have been a big part of them.
Yeah, so those are definitely going to be a big part of Will's sideboard plan. I don't think there's, again, a ton else here. Probably don't want to go towards the angers or the torches or anything like that. So
No.
everything else seems to be on the back, on leaving it on the bench for now. But yeah, we're going to be go back down to game number 2. Blake's going to be on the play this game. I mean, play draw does definitely matter. Like if you're the first person to get your card advantage engine online, or in this case, in the case of game 1, Will was the first person to get Children online. You can kind of like press your advantage a little bit more, and if your opponent ever just has one turn of stumbling, it's really easy for the Rakdos deck to take advantage of that and just kind of press the advantage a lot more.
All right, start things off with
Oh,
a hand disruption spell,
there's the
and
invoke.
there's the invoke. Yeah, 2 lands. Thoughtseize is the one that hits the bin, though.
Huh. That's
Perhaps
interesting.
maybe protecting another Thoughtseize in hand. Don't know.
Yeah, so Blake sees from the Thoughtseize probably the 2 most powerful cards in the matchup, Fable the Mirror Breaker and Invoke Despair,
Yeah.
and instead of that, just chooses to take Will's Thoughtseize. Now, that could be, wanting to protect his own powerful play, and maybe Blake's hand is a little weak in terms of he only has 1 payoff, right? Maybe Blake's hand is lands, a kill spell, and say 1 annex or 1 fable, and doesn't have the second payoff. Where if you look at it from Will's side, Will's like, okay, well, I have the Fable and the Invoke Despair. If you take one of them, I still have the other one. I think that is something that was going through Blake's mind there.
And we see the second duress or another duress hit the Fable here. Will being a good guy here, playing with the hand face up for Blake and us. Appreciate that.
Oh, love it.
Okay,
All
well,
right.
the hand disruption part down under control here for Blake, but still Will as the finds the Blood Tithe Harvester on turn 2. So you're probably not all that upset with the state of things if you're Will. You're building towards that Invoke Despair later on. Another one
Well,
coming from
we're not
Blake
building
here.
towards anything now.
Yeah, there we go. So we wondered why he did that on turn 1, and the answer was because he planned on playing 3 hand disruption spells. Invoke in the graveyard now.
Yeah, and that kind of does make sense. So basically, when you Thoughtseize your opponent's Thoughtseize, it's either I have a 1 threat that I'm trying to protect, or I have enough discard spells where I'm just going to
Right.
be able to take every single card you have anyways. And it looks like for Blake's case, it was in fact the latter.
Oh, and he shocked in the Blood Crypt there, wondered if maybe that was just to set up a trade with the Mutavault on the Blood Tithe if needed. Instead, has to go for the throw to get rid of the Blood Tithe Harvester. And now Blake finally has his own hand Thoughtseized, which
Yeah,
targets the Withering Torment.
not too bad here. Now, the unfortunate part for Blake here is, these decks are playing 4 copies of Mutavault, which is an extremely powerful card with Unholy Annex.
Yep.
Not a very powerful card when you're trying to escape Kroxa.
Nope, and that's why it's just probably that's you're able to play it up front here. Hit a land. Okay, so you're now, if you're Blake, it at least turns on because there are 6 cards total in the graveyard, which means you can
Mhm.
escape 5 of them for Croxa. So if you draw um, any color works, so any color of land source,
Yep.
anything that's just simply not colorless, you should have escape Croxa as a line available.
Yeah, I almost wonder if it was beneficial for Blake to attack last turn into Will's open mana. So obvious, if Blake attacked with the Mutavault, Will has the opportunity to Fatal Push the Mutavault. But I think you're happy with that if you're Blake, because then Will doesn't have the Fatal Push for the Escape Croxa,
Right.
and the Mutavault can't cast the Croxa anyways. So I think maybe
It
you
would
could
have
have
been
attacked
good
with the
bait
Mutavault
there.
last turn. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, 13 to 12. This has been exactly the kind of hand disruption removal game we expected to see. Blake finding his own Blood Tithe Harvester there lines up okay. I mean, Will has double Mutavault and the Fatal Push that we see, and is just going to instead go for the Blood token, discarding
Ooh.
Invoke Despair because not exactly close to casting it with the
Yeah.
Mutavault mana.
It is pretty funny how these Mutavaults are coming up for both players, where it's,
Yeah.
Mutavault is extremely powerful with Unholy Annex, but it's not free to put it into your deck when you
No,
have.
it does not cast Master of the Pearl Trident.
No. Yeah. As a Merfolk player, you're well, you know the struggles.
Yeah, it is just brutal if you're Will having to throw away that Evoke Despair that you sideboarded in, and knowing that Wag might actually just get ground out by Croxa.
Yeah, and it looks like no colored source here for Blake. I mean, that was the turn, right? If you
Yeah,
Will's tapped out, if you find the colored source that turn, you make him discard the Fatal
yep.
Push, and you say, "Well, you better find an answer for this Croxa."
Doesn't work out that way. Instead, Blake just serves with the Mutavault. Now Will gets to cycle a Blood Crypt with his Fable, runs his own Mutavault into the Fatal Push to Blake's holding. So again, Fatal Push in hand for Will, and both players just kind of back and forth.
Yeah, this is a a very,
Here
very
we go.
interesting game. Okay, so here's the Croxa. So that is going to prompt Will. Will's got two in hand, one of which we know is a Fatal Push. So presumably, Will's probably going to discard the other card, Fatal Push the Croxa, and then both players will be empty-handed. Blake with a slight mana advantage, but Will with a battlefield advantage because he's going to have a Flip Fable.
Yeah, the blood token for Blake will give him the redraw. Uh, pretty interesting board state, I would say, at the end of all of this smoke clearing.
And I think Will's other card might just be a second Fatal Push. So I wonder what we're thinking about here. Okay.
There we go. Yep. Well, there's now, redo our count, 2 cards in the graveyard. So 2/5 of the way is Blake from escaping that Croxa again. All right, Mutavault getting in there. Down to 10 for Blake. Huge draw step for him here, and he's got the redraw if he chooses it. So let's see what he finds. It's a removal spell, which you won't say no to for the reflection, and I'll attack you with my Mutavault. Down to 9 is Will. Could not be more even right now. Gosh, look at that. Just snap pass back for Will after the attack, and it's a fear of missing out is the follow-up for Blake.
Yeah, I mean, you get to these spots in the game where it's just, haymaker rope back and forth and who
Yeah.
can draw a little bit better. I mean, again, it is definitely, I think Blake is advantage here, not just because of the battlefield, but also the mana. Mana is a big part of this where, Will can say if Will draws Annex, Will can play it for 3 mana, doesn't have the 4th mana to animate the Mutavault. If Blake draws Annex, he can just make a 6/6.
Yeah, that fear of missing out, by the way, also just helping Blake get a little deeper. Happens to hold the 1 life advantage as both players have now finally gotten onto the board with something besides Mutavaults. Fear of missing out for Blake. Will Kruger has up a game here in the finals, trying to finish it off and take down the title. Has a Blood Tithe Harvester in play.
Delirium check.
Yeah, that was the
Sorcery,
count. I
creature,
think
instant
so.
land. Yep, you got 4.
3 instant land creature, and just now 1 card away from escaping that Croxa again. So blocking the fear of missing out, like kind of
Yeah.
damaging as well. You talked about this before we came into this about how similar the decks were, but how one of the key differences in them was the Croxa, and Croxa looking really, really good in this spot.
Yeah, it was kind of awkward game 1 where Blake was just under the gun with a turn 4 Shieldred, didn't have an answer to it. And when you're that far behind, it's, Croaks is not going to do anything when you're in a spot like that. But in a game like this, that's a lot more about top decking and resources and who can amass more card advantage or just, who top decks better. Croaks is really good in those games.
All right, and there we go. That I believe will send us into the final of the finals, because why not? We want all of our money's worth. That means a game 3 between these two players. What a back and forth one that was. I think we were coming up on the third Croxa cast to be the difference maker.
Yeah, that was definitely a lot less of a one-sided affair than game one was. We mentioned how game one, Will just had a Shieldred. Blake didn't have an answer for it. It was just kind of all that
Yeah.
mattered. And then in that game was a lot, like you said, a lot more back and forth, where a lot more trading of resources. And ultimately, I think that game came down to Blake just having a mana advantage,
Yeah.
and like Blake having 5 mana to Will's 3 is going to be on average a lot better in those top deck situations, because has mana to play Annex for 5 and has the Croxa. And Croxa we highlighted it in the first game. Croxa is the one card difference. Well, not the one card. Basically, Blake has Croxa, Will has Invoke Despair. But that game was just all about Croxa.
I'm going to take a small step back here with the Croxa, because what we did see come up for both players was the Mutavaults clashing with Escaping Croxa, with casting Invoke Despair. I don't know if these Rakdos decks have quite reached their final form yet. With that that was a struggle for both players in that game. And both of these players are in the finals. So this deck, this Rakdos deck that we saw really dominant today, it has some deficiencies, as we saw there. Even though it clearly has the power level to compete with anything in the format, and that's why it's an all Rakdos finals here in Game 3. Blake Madsen, Will Kruger, one of these two will be your champion. Shieldred hits the graveyard from a discard spell.
Yeah, it looks like Will had a tap land. Blake had a Blackleaf and a Thoughtseize. Now not going to have to contend with that Shieldred, at least the first copy. And no 2-drop here for Blake. Yeah, looks like we have a kill spell instead. And I think Blake has a Fable the Mirror Breaker, and I think he might have an Annex as well. Oh, second push, brutal turn here. Whenever you get to these early stages of the game, if you can double spell on turn 2, it kind of, this is how you break serve, right?
Right.
Where you get to the turn that your opponent, your Will went 2-drop into 3-drop, but the fact that you have double push, untap, play your 3-drop, now you're ahead on the battlefield. You might be behind a turn on mana, but you are ahead on the battlefield, and you're kind of putting Will to the test.
These players played these first few turns lightning quick. I am sure that they have played the Rakdos Mirror plenty of times. Both players with a Fable in play. Will, if you're trying to figure out what you're looking at there, those are the revealed cards, I believe, from to Blake from his hand that they're missing out, and go for the throat there as he resolves the second chapter of the Fable. He has more cards in his hand, so both players with resources to go still. We've got a long way to go, but it's been a quick series of trades back and forth. But now Will goes into the tank trying to figure out what is the best way through this. I'm staring down a 2/2 from Fable that can create additional mana for my opponent. We know how relevant that could be. So does thinking about whether he wants to remove that, or whether perhaps it's better to just develop his own game plan. There's the considerations going through Will's head right now.
Yeah, the first 3 turns are easy. When you just go 1, 2, 3, you don't really have any other decisions on the first couple of turns. But once you get to these stages of the game, where you get to these like double spell turns, I would guess that Will probably has maybe a land and another 1 or a 2-drop in his hand, and he can deploy 2 of his 3 spells and trying to figure out which 2 spells that I want to cast this turn. Thinking about, should I go for the Throat the 2/2 to keep Blake off mana? Because if I don't, then Blake might just cast Unholy Annex next turn. There's a lot of things going through Will's. By Unholy Annex, I meant the Ritual Chamber, but a lot of things going through Will's head. And chooses not to play the Fear of Missing Out, which is another sign that the last card in Will's hand is very good.
All right. Blake has his own Fear of Missing Out, pitches a land.
Oh, it's funny that he discarded the Urborg, because the Urborg would actually have allowed him to have the Mutavault tap for Croxa mana, but it would also allow Will's Mutavault to tap for Invoke Despair. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword.
Yeah, say the Urborgs obviously help cover up some of the problems and the that you can run into in corner cases. In this case, it's just good fear of missing out fodder. Fear of missing out is what actually meets the go for the throat here.
Yeah, so Will ideally, maybe looking for like draw land for turn, play land, fear into another 3-drop. Even just drawing annex would be fine too. Okay, we're casting fear. What do we draw? Invoke maybe?
And
No,
pitching
second
a
fear.
second fear.
Awkward.
Oh, slams the blood tithe right off the top. Okay. That's not bad at all. Adds to the board, gives you pressure, taxes your opponent's removal, and you're up to 2 blood tokens now, which means that you can churn through a couple draws to give some more utility to your blood tithe.
Well, the blood tithe is also fantastic with the reflection. If
Right.
Blake doesn't have a removal spell here, Will's going to be able to start copying the blood tithe harvester with the reflection of Higijiki and then sacrifice the copies to be able to kill Blake's creatures. So Will has a decision here. Which creature would he rather copy? And then in turn, which one do you want to sacrifice to Liliana? It looks like he prefers copying the fear of missing out, which is, a little interesting because that reflection on Blake's side is a little scary. So we'll give it a little bit of a think here.
Yeah. I don't know that the 3 mana Liliana is necessarily a sign of strength from Blake here, because you, by making your opponent sacrifice a creature when they have 3, are giving Will a lot of agency in this decision. He gets to choose his line from here on forward, but it may also be setting up another spell. So Will ultimately chooses to pitch the fear of missing out and keep the blood tithe harvester. And so he is going to have an opportunity here to set up what you were talking about, because all Blake does is follow up with his own fear of missing out.
Yeah, and you see Will almost sacrifice that blood tithe harvester, and I think Will is very, very happy with the decision that he made,
Yeah.
given the fact that Blake's follow-up was also a fear of missing out. Now, Will has another decision here. Do you sacrifice both harvesters to kill the fear of missing out and the reflection, or do you just sacrifice the copy and keep the original in play? Kind of depends on what he drew. It looks like he picked up an annex. So I think with the annex in hand, my inclination would be probably just kill both, but then you end up getting the card that you draw off the annex discarded to Liliana, so it's a little awkward.
Yeah, and then
But
you've got Liliana back on 2 after that, which is always um a little scarier than Liliana at 1, of course. But it is the annex follow-up here. So able to set that up, able to still have a reflection that he's activated in a blood tithe harvester. Honestly, looking pretty okay if you're Will. So on to Blake's side here, you've untapped. You do have access to plenty of mana. You get to tick up a Liliana, and that's what he's going to start with. You better hope that what you've got is great. Instead, it's a fear of missing out. So to the top of the deck we go for help.
yeah, I mean, Blake drawing a couple of fear of missing outs here, which don't look that great, but I think there's delirium, right? Enchantment, land, instant, creature, sorcery. So we have 5 types. So his fear of missing outs could provide a good amount of pressure. And because Will was not willing to sacrifice the harvester to kill the fear, he's
Mm-hmm.
probably not going to trade. So this is pretty likely a 6-point attack here for Blake, putting Will to 12. And then you say, next turn, maybe Will uses 5 mana to make a demon, and then you have the Liliana to Edict. So it's not this one's going to be close.
All right. Will untaps for his turn. He's thinking about it. I don't think he's drawn you. We're thinking in our upkeep here.
Yeah, I would say at this point, Will is definitely ahead, but doesn't quite have the full stranglehold on the game yet because let's assume that Will draws land this turn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he wants to, do the annex and make a demon. If he draws a land, doesn't have enough mana to be able to make a demon and reflection copy blood tithe. So if you make a demon, you're risking Blake untapping with 2 fear of missing outs
Right.
with 2 mutavaults in play for a huge combat next turn. So Will really going through all the permutations of what Blake can draw. What do I need to kill this turn? Do I have to sacrifice my harvester? I think what might end up happening is Will's just going to go copy the harvester with reflection, sack the copy, kill a fear of missing out, and then do the mutavault trick to drain Blake for 2 and then leave up a couple of mana.
Yeah, I mean, just keeping essentially parity by doing that, right? That seems fine if you because every activation you get out of Kiki that turns into a Blood Tithe Harvester that then removes a creature is gaining new card advantage. So basically, if you can find a way to not die while doing that, if you can feel comfortable enough with your life total, then you're going to be able to grind Blake out from this point. I think that's what Will's thinking. And it seems like, hey, this plan might work out okay for him here because he still has a blocker back. He's at 14 life, which feels pretty safe. And he's getting the cards off of Annex here. So honestly, looking pretty okay in this situation if you're Will. Although here goes Liliana. It's going to sacrifice itself to make Will sacrifice. And looks like he's thinking about turning on the Mutavault here, but thinking about it.
Yeah, this is tricky because if Blake drew a kill spell, Will sacrificing the Mutavault means that the Reflection Blood Tithe loop is going to be broken up now.
Right.
So this is going to be really interesting. It's all comes down to what Blake drew off of for the turn. It looks like perhaps nothing because we're going to combat, although we didn't fire up 2 Mutavaults, so that's maybe a sign of strength here for Blake that we at least drew something we can cast.
Yeah, slamming a Shieldred or something like that here would certainly change the math quite quickly. So Will thinking through
Shield are probably one of the weaker cards that Blake could have here because there's so many bloods in play where, Will could just untap and copy the Harvester, sack the copy, kill the
Oh,
Shield.
true,
So
because he can just right. Well, yeah, this is if he's
kind of has to be a kill spell. But then maybe if Blake drew a 1 or 2 mana kill spell, may have also fired up the second Mutavault. So very curious to see what Blake drew here.
Yeah, that's what not sure what his follow-up would be there. He's leaving up. He's got 4 mana, 5 with since the Mutavault untaps, but Will's actually going to put
really
the Blood Tithe Harvester decides okay, well, I was a Shieldred.
Wow. Oh, you see the shake of the head from Will. Yeah, that is wow, that is something else. So Will had the opportunity, if he had kept the Harvester in play, could have just copied the Harvester with Reflection. But after trading off that Harvester for the fear of missing out, is going to be in
I don't know if
deep
his
trouble to this Shieldred.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if his read was Annex plus Mutavault activation there.
Might have been. Yeah.
That may have been his read, but instead it was Shieldred, and the Harvester is gone, and Will is down to 8 life.
Yeah, and Will's hand is Fable, Annex, Land, none of which do anything against Shieldred, basically. So, I mean, your best bet is probably just go
shock
in here. Yeah, I was going to say maybe just Fable, Chump Block, or I guess you can go Fable, make a Reflection, use Kiki, copy the Reflection, Chump Block with the copy. But Will is really not sure of himself now. That might be the decision that is the difference between winning and losing this game.
It certainly looks, unless something changes. I mean, Shieldred's going to clean it up really quickly here. Those blood tokens can't even go digging that deep for Will because of Shieldred.
Yeah, and I mean that's a judgment call. I don't even think Will necessarily made an incorrect play. I think he just made a judgment call of, this is the time where I want to trade off my Blood Tithe Harvester. And look at Will's hand. I mean, he has another Annex and a Fable the Mirror Breaker, plenty of gas in hand. If Blake's card, if he has the read where Blake didn't draw Shieldred, maybe that's an okay play. But just had the wrong read here and is getting severely punished for it.
Yeah, it has to just bite the bullet, activate a blood token, pitch an Annex. Blake does not miss that Shieldred trigger, one of the more important Shieldred triggers of his life. And
I think Will drew a second Blood Crypt. That
I don't
is
think Will's
not going to do
there.
it.
Yeah, and okay, well, I'm still thinking it through. I don't know if he's going to go ahead and not shock. He's going to go ahead and play it untap, or no, he is going to tap it in. Okay. We're at 2 life at the end of all of it as Will after the trigger from the Annex.
Yeah,
and that does
really
it. Handshake over. Blake Matson's Shieldred was enough to finish it off, and he takes it down, coming back to win the finals. In that trophy on that side of the table will be his. Congratulations, Blake Matson. You are the victor of the Pioneer 5K here in Madison. Congratulations. What an ending that was.
Yeah, crazy match. And I think if Will goes back and watches that one, he's going to be kicking himself. Again, not I don't really think that Will made an incorrect play. I think he made a judgment call whether or not Blake drew, some big creature versus any other 3 mana card advantage engine. And because Will's hand was all gas at that point with a Fable and an Annex, I think, just a unfortunate, judgment call there. And congratulations to Blake. Played very, very well. And the Croxes, they took it home.
Yeah, the Croxa looked really good in game two. It was games 1 and 3. Well, Shieldred looked really good, but honestly, those games go how the Rakdos games go. And the sideboards, both players back and forth run each other out of resources. Who can navigate the last couple of pieces of cardboard you're going to have to try to win? And that person was Blake Madsen, who is our 5K Pioneer
I've done
Trial
it.
winner. Blake,
It was me.
congrats.
I'm victorious in the top 8 of Rakdos Demons.
Hey, congratulations, man.
Thank you.
Hey, what was going through your mind on the last turn of that game where you draw that Shieldred, move to combat, and how that last set of turns plays out?
Just he's down lands. I'm just hoping he doesn't have removal for it. But yeah, my draw just lined up pretty good against what he had. So
Yeah, I think specifically his decision to trade off that harvester that one turn, with having the reflection in play. That was a very very close game, and very very well played by both of you. One thing we were talking about in the interim was the addition, because both decks are very very similar, but you have Croxa and Will doesn't,
yeah,
and Croxa was a really big fixture of that game too, wasn't it?
yeah. So the thought process behind including that one was the blue black deck that's been kind of
Hmm.
popular in Moto. The like Yorion, this town ain't big enough, that kind of stuff, where they make you discard. So getting some value out of your discards is really nice. And Croaks has always just been a good card for these mid-range type mirror matches. So yeah,
Well, talk about you played through a lot of mirrors. I don't know about on the day, but at least through some of the top eight.
yeah.
How did you feel? Basically, obviously your deck performed great, but how did you feel you were set up in the mirror, including in that last match?
So I got a couple Lilianas. I have a couple more removal spells in the sideboard. A lot of people are on Invoke Despair, and obviously that card is awesome when it's on the stack and you're casting it, but I think it's pretty bad everywhere else. Like you have 4 Mutavaults in your deck. I don't know. Some of my opponents weren't able to cast it. Like I love that card. I liked it when it was in standard. When it got banned in standard, it was awesome. But I didn't include it because I just was worried about not being able to cast it. So I think my plan was pretty good for the mirror. I will say I think I played the first game of that finals match a little too loose. I could have slowed things down and tried to drag it out, but I don't know. Happy how I played otherwise. So
Well, yeah, man. Congratulations. It
thank you.
was a great win. And I'm sure you've got a car of friends and maybe some dinner to attend
Yeah.
to after this. Anyone you want to shout out as helping you out this weekend?
Yeah, my buddy Sean Gallagher convinced me to come down. He drove us, so shout out to him. He top aided yesterday in standard.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Blake, congratulations again.
thank you.
We will see you
Congrats, man.
and some future NRG events.
Yeah, let's hope so.
All right. Well, thank you all of you for hanging out with us. Let's talk about those future events before we get out of here. Where can you find us next? It's Chicagoland on May 10th and 11th, 10K Modern Showdown on Saturday, followed by a 5K Standard Trial on Sunday, sponsored, of course, by Ultimate Guard. Chicagoland, May 10th and 11th. Don't want to miss that one. And then Indianapolis, and this is where we have the 10K Team Showdown, Final Fantasy Team Sealed, along with a 10K Standard Showdown, June 28th and 29th. You don't want to miss it. Indianapolis, Indiana. That is going to be a highlight of the entire year. I already know it. Team Showdown, Indianapolis. But first, we have to wrap it here in Madison. This was a great weekend. All of us here have enjoyed bringing you Magic. Devin, Doomwake O'Donnell, we got to see some great action in the top eight. What is your takeaway from today?
Pioneer, still a lot of Rakdos. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
joke at the end, but I mean, we did get to see a lot of sweet decks on camera. We get to see that Gruel Cookies deck. We saw Kamari playing the Acerak deck. A lot of sweet decks all day. But in the end, Batsy's Fatal Push, still hard to beat him.
It's pretty good. Well, thank you, Devin, for hanging out with me. And thank you, all of you, for hanging out with us here at the NRG Championship Series from Madison. We will see you next time. Thanks for hanging out.